Hi, I'm Jerry Portnoy. I had a wonderful career in music playing with Muddy Waters and Eric Clapton. I went all over the world playing blues harmonica, and I'm happy to be here on Talking Blues with Mako.
So you just wrote a book called Dancing with Muddy, and it's a wonderful book. It's. I just found it so interesting. I'm wondering what the writing process was like for you. How did you actually decide to write a book?
Well, it took me 81 years, actually. Um, I started a long time ago. I mean, I had written a few things. I'd written some of the early chapters, and actually, I found that writing about my life before music was actually the easiest part. And, I had quite an interesting life before I ever started playing music professionally. I grew up really around the blues in the Maxwell Street area of Chicago, which was really the crucible of Chicago blues and rock and roll, really, because the Mississippi Delta blues players that came up from the South in the 40s, Chicago was the promised land. They went up there for better living conditions and better jobs and payday. And they brought their music with them, and the musicians would go to the Maxwell Street area to play on the street. And so I heard the blues as a child outside my father's rug store on Maxwell Street in the late 40s. And then later on, after I dropped out of college, I ran the largest pool hall in Chicago. I had a little bit of a skill with the pool cue, and I hung around with a now extinct breed of humanity, real pool hustlers. Like I knew Minnesota Fats and Cornbread Red and Daddy Warbucks and a list of colorful characters. And I did a brief stint in the Army. I was a paratrooper, and I lived in San Francisco during 1967 Summer of Love, and then I bummed around Europe. And it was in Europe that I heard the blues again. Um, I heard a record by Sonny Boy Williamson. I went into a record store and I bought this record. It had a picture of Sonny Boy with the harp stuck in his mouth the long way. And I took it back to the crash pad I was staying at. And once I heard that record, my life just took a different turn, and I was obsessed.
We should say that when you traveled to Europe, you did pick up a friend's harmonica and took that with you on your road trip in Europe and played along with it while you traveled around the different countries in Europe.
Yeah, well, yes, I was over at a friend's house before I left for Europe, and he had a harmonica sitting on his mantelpiece. And I had tried, I loved music, and I had tried various instruments before piano and guitar and accordion, and everything required a certain amount of digital dexterity. And for drums, you had four things going at once: 2 feet and two hands, and two hands on a piano and a pedal, and 10 fingers on a guitar. It all took a lot of coordination. But the harmonica, I picked up the harmonica and I figured, well, low notes to the left, high notes to the right, breathe in, breathe out. I can do this. And the other factor, I think I had a physical affinity for the instrument because I seemed to be very oral. I had to be either talking or smoking a cigarette or stuffing something in my pie hole or kissing my girlfriend or something with the mouth. So the instrument suited me. And I took it with me when I was hitchhiking around Europe, and I was just playing little folk songs and little melodies that I could figure out. But when I heard that Sonny Boy Williamson record, I think it triggered memory traces from hearing the blues so much as a child on Maxwell Street. I heard Sonny Boy, and I just said, I have to do that.
Now, can you easily imagine to doing that? Like Sonny Boy being one of the greatest harmonica players, but if you're just fooling around, breathing in and out and making notes, how do you comprehend what he's doing on the harmonica? Was that something you could easily foresee?
Well, Rome wasn't built in a day. I mean, I had to go. I was so instantly obsessed. My sole focus was getting back to the United States because I knew that's where I had to go if I wanted to learn how to play this music. So I went back to the United States and I immersed myself in the music and the culture of the blues. And I went back to Chicago and I started playing around little black clubs on the South Side and the West Side. And I was working a day job at Cook County Jail when Muddy Waters pulled me out of pulled me out of jail to put me in his band, so to speak.
But that wasn't the thing that I find amazing is that you picked up the harmonica not very early in your life.
No,
You were in what, late 20s?
I was 24 when I first picked it up.
Okay. So that's not an early age to be picking up a new instrument. And I presume by the time Muddy called you, you had been on tour and you had played with a few people in Chicago, but you didn't have like years and years of touring behind you at this point. So you must have picked up that instrument and got very good very quickly.
Uh, yeah, pretty much. I mean, I was obsessive about it. I mean, I'd fall asleep playing it, and I'd wake up and grab it and start playing again before I even brushed my teeth. So, I think really to get really at the highest level of any discipline, you have to be pretty monomaniacal and obsessive, and I certainly was.
So I wonder I mean, was that a goal? When you decided that you wanted to sound like Sonny Boy, I don't know if that's what you want, but you wanted to play harmonica like him. Did you think one day you would be a bona fide blues musician?
Well, it was a kind of a fantasy. I mean, at first I was just concentrating on playing, but after a while, hanging out in clubs, I wanted to be up on stage instead of in the audience, and wanted to play with live musicians instead of just playing with records. And then I was out in California, and of course, I play nothing like Sonny Terry, but he was the first great harmonica player I met. A wonderful guy, a real sweetheart. And he told me, he said, he held up a harmonica and he said, "This harmonica has taken me all over the world. If you stick with it, it's going to do the same for you." And like I said in the book, those words were the fuel of dreams. And I used to hang out with my buddy Rick Estrin from Rick Estrin and the Nightcats. We've been best friends for over 50 years, and we used to hang out together and practice and kind of dream about doing it at a higher level. And, it's great because over 50 years later, we both had wonderful careers and both have been all over the world and made records and had fans. And
No, you both did quite well. Um,
yeah.
Going back to the writing, I mean, you won a writing contest when you were very young to get free. You came in second place to get baseball tickets. So obviously, you showed signs of being a good writer back then. Was writing the book difficult?
Um, no. Well, finishing it was difficult. Um, like I said, when you first asked me this question, I had written some of the early chapters, and then I just kind of ran out of steam, and it just remained kind of a fantasy in my mind as something I'd probably never really finish. And then I have a good friend, a great writer who wrote a classic book called Snowblind, A Brief Career in the Cocaine Trade. This was a huge, huge bestseller in the 70s. Anyway, he's a wonderful writer. He used to work for the Rolling Stone and other publications. At any rate, somehow we were talking about the way I grew up, and I said, "Well, I wrote something about it. I'll send it to you." And I sent him actually the Maxwell Street chapter about growing up down there, and he just flipped out over it. He said, "This writing is so damn good. You better get this published." And that just lit a fire under me. I mean, to hear it from him who's been praised by all kinds of great writers, Hunter Thompson and Nora Ephron, and just, to get that kind of praise from him really lit a fire under me. And I sat down. And of course, it was also helpful that the pandemic was going on, COVID was happening. So, I wasn't really going out much. I just went down to my man cave down here in my basement and took out my computer and opened up the file that had laid dormant and pecked away till I was finished with it. But actually, writing, um, like I said, I had no problem writing the early part of my life, running the pool hall and being in the Army and Summer of Love in San Francisco, all that. I actually got stuck at the point when I joined Muddy Waters Band. You would think that would be the easy part, but as soon as I got in the band, in the narrative, I I had no idea what to do with it, where to go, what to say. Until I found on the internet, I found a complete career itinerary for Muddy. And that was like the Rosetta Stone. That just unlocked everything because it started in 1954, I think, and went to 1982. Anyway, I went down to May 25th, 1974, which was the date of my first gig with Muddy. And then I went down and, oh yeah, I remember that gig. That's where this happened, you know. Oh yeah, that's where this happened. So it jogged my memory about incidents and anecdotes that I could tell, and of course you weave in, and it was chronological too, and then you weave in some kind of connective tissue, so to speak, to make the narrative flow. And as far as my ability to write, it really, I it, I think in order to be a good writer, you have to be a great reader.
Hmm.
And I was a great reader from the time I was a kid. I loved to read, and I read good stuff. I read classics. You know, I read good things, and the rhythm of good writing, I think, was in my head. So it really, I didn't labor over it too much, and the editor hardly touched it.
Wow.
She said it was one of the cleanest manuscripts she'd ever seen.
Wow, that's a compliment. I I wonder, did you in being such an avid reader, was there anybody or any style that you modeled this after, or did you?
No, no, I was just trying to tell my story and make it interesting. Um, the great English diarist Samuel Pepys from the 17th century. Uh, I'm not supposed to be this erudite being a blues musician,
I'm impressed.
but this is a result of being a voracious reader as a kid. And he said that any man's life is worth telling if it's told well. And I believe that's true because in any person's life, you have triumphs and tragedies and moments of joy and moments of despair. And it's a matter, so every person's life is dramatic in a way. It's a matter of how you tell the story. Now, I thought the actual incidents of my life were interesting on their face.
Hmm.
And then it's just a matter of telling the story in a way that keeps the reader interested. And I've been very gratified by the reviews because people say they couldn't put it down. It just carried them along. And that's what I wanted to do. Just,
And I guess there's just no way of knowing how people would react to something you write.
well, that's true. I mean, my goal was to make it a good read for anybody that picked up the book, not necessarily blues and music fans. I mean, obviously, that's especially in the second half of the book. That's the focus is my musical career and various things that happen along the way. Um, but I wanted to make it a good read to a casual reader or a general reader that would just pick it up, and I would hook them early and keep them interested. And at least from the reaction I've had so far, from the reviews I've seen, it seems like people are reacting that way. I, I really, I really wanted this to reach a wider audience than just blues fans. Even though
Um,
for blues fans, it's right up their
it's
alley.
gold.
Yeah.
When Muddy called you and you were working at the jail, I believe, um, did that come totally out of the blue for you? Like, I know you had played on stage with him, so it's not like it would be a complete surprise out of nowhere. And you had, I presume, a relationship with him. But when you got that call, I mean, had you even thought about the possibility of playing with the Muddy Waters band?
Well, yes. Well, first of all, it's the greatest job in the world for a blues harmonica player. So probably anybody that tries to play blues harmonica would fantasize about something like that. But in point of fact, I was working at the jail, and my first band leader, the guy I hadn't played with him in a while, but the first guy I played with in Chicago and worked with around the Midwest was Johnny Young, who was a great mandolin and guitar player. And he had passed away, and there was a benefit being held for him at a club on the north side. And so I had worked with Johnny for a couple of years previously, and I figured I'd go down and play at the benefit. I knew most of the musicians in town, and I figured I'd just get up there and play a couple tunes with whoever was there. I had no idea that Muddy himself was going to be there. But when I walked into the club, well, first of all, I walked into the club and it was so crowded that I really didn't want to deal with the whole scene. So I almost turned around and left. But I glanced toward the stage and I saw Muddy sitting at a table close to the stage, and he's looking dead in my eye, and he motions me over. Well, that's like a royal summons. So I elbow my way through the crowd, and he asked me if I would play his set with him. And I looked around and I saw the other guys in his band, but I didn't see his harmonica player at the time, who was Mojo Buford. Uh, but I didn't know that, he had left the band or anything. I figured maybe he was just, unavailable for the playing the
Mhm.
benefit. Um, at any rate, I finished the set with Muddy, and he said, "Man," he said, "boy, you play that shit right." And he said, and this, when I heard these words, he said, "Can you travel?" And it just blew my mind. And I said to him, I remember the exact words I said. I said, "Muddy, anywhere in this world you want me to be, you just tell me and I'll be there." And then he said, "You're going to hear from me."
Wow.
And I went back to my apartment, and I'm fantasizing about getting the gig. But I thought he was just being gracious. I, I didn't want to go crazy, fantasizing about that. I was playing with other people, and I was trying to get my own band together at the time. So after a couple, I tripped out for a couple of days, but after that, I just tried to put it out of my mind. But I came home that was on a Tuesday, that benefit. I came home from work on the Friday from the jail, and I was eating some Kentucky Fried Chicken or something, some takeout in my apartment, and the phone rang, and the guy, the person asked to speak to Jerry. I identified myself, and he said, "Well, this is Scott Cameron, Muddy Waters' manager." As soon as he said that, I knew what this was about, and I wouldn't let my mind race ahead. I just let him explain it, and he told me that Muddy wanted me to call him, and he was at home, and I should uh, call him right now. I had Muddy's number, and his manager told me, as soon as you talk to him, call me right back. So I didn't go crazy. I just did what he said. I hung up. I called Muddy. Muddy barked hello. He said, "Well, we start May 25th in Indianapolis, and you might want to go down to Queen Bee's, which was a Southside club, and play with the boys. They're playing there this weekend, his band." And that was it. And I said, I didn't know what else to say. I just said, "Well, thanks, Mud." And I hung up, and I called his manager back because he wanted my social security number, some tax stuff. And he said, uh, "You better get yourself a passport because we're playing on the French Riviera next month." So, so I had no trouble quitting my job. And the next month I was playing on the French Riviera, and the rest is history. It was fantastic. It was fantastic.
Okay, so you talk in detail later on about what you earned with Muddy Span. I don't need the details, but when this job was offered to you, was money even discussed, or the
Oh
idea
no,
that you
no,
would
no,
quit?
no, no, no.
Okay, but you also quit your job, so you were making a certain amount of money. Was there any interest in knowing what you were gonna earn before you quit, or that it just didn't matter because
No,
you were the Muddy Waters
whatever
band?
he was going to pay me was going to be good enough.
How confident were you as a player at that point?
Well, those are intimidating shoes to step into. Those shoes have been filled by the greatest harmonica players in history in the blues.
Yeah.
Little Walter and Big Walter and James Cotton and Junior Wells and George Smith and Paul Osher and so it was a little bit intimidating at first, and of course, this is 50 years later, and I'm a little more sophisticated as a player, although I don't have the physical ability I had when I was younger. But Muddy was wonderful because Muddy, as opposed to some other band leaders who were jealous of their sidemen and liked all the light for themselves, Muddy was very happy to see his band members shine. And so the first week I was in his band, we were playing at the Cellar Door in Washington D.C. And it came time for my solo in some song, and I'm standing right next to him, and he reaches out and puts his hand in the small of my back just before my solo, and he pushes me forward and he whispers, he says, "Go get him, son." And that just gave me a ton of confidence, and that's it's just a great it gives great credit to Muddy as a band leader that he was generous that way.
I mean, he basically changed your life.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about it. And as I say in the book, everything it was the pivot point in my life because everything that came before led up to getting that gig, and everything that came after that gig flowed out of it.
At one point or another, things don't work out very well with the band, and the band leaves Muddy. I presume that wasn't an easy decision. I don't know if it's in the book. It seems like it's not like you instigated the whole thing, but you're the one who spoke up and everybody backed you. Is that the correct way of describing
Yeah, I
it?
was I was looking out for the band. Nobody else was. His manager certainly wasn't. He didn't care anything about the band. He cared about Muddy. Muddy was the goose that laid the golden egg, and our concerns. He would just say to us, "Well, it's not my not my problem. I'm Muddy Waters' manager. I'm his personal manager. I'm not your manager." So the business was run in a way that was made it more. He was making our job more difficult, and I was the one that spoke up, and so I was the one with a target on my back. I pretty much excoriated Scott Cameron one day, and it pretty much made me a marked man. But the guys, they knew what time it was. They knew I was standing up for them, looking out for the interests of the band as a whole, and they could see what Scott was doing. He was all about divide and conquer. He'd tell different people different stories, and as far as I'm concerned, to quote my father, the guy was so crooked you'd have to dig his grave with a corkscrew. So yes, unfortunately, it ended, and it was unfortunate because the band would have loved to stay with Muddy, and Muddy, believe me, did not want to lose that band, but it just became an untenable situation, and so we struck out on our own, and I did another 6 years with the band as the legendary blues band, and I had my rapprochement with Muddy, which was great because I loved Muddy and I revere him to this day. He gave me my life. So if there was any hatchet to bury, we buried it.
But can you tell me about that relationship between you and Muddy? What was that like? I know that there was management involved and whatever, and there were business decisions that Muddy didn't directly get himself involved in. But what was like, if I was to ask you, Jerry, what was Muddy like to you? What did he represent? What did he mean to you? What would you say?
Well, it's hard to say because he meant a lot in so many different areas. He meant a lot musically and professionally and personally and all that. But he changed my life, and of course I'd played with a lot of black bands, and we were both prideful people. So I mean, obviously, Muddy Waters is a historic name. They'll be listening to him in 500 years, and I'm an asterisk. But I didn't look at Muddy as with kind of an adoration or deference. I mean, he was a man, and I was a man. You know, so occasionally it could be contentious, but he was wonderful. He was really a kind-hearted guy, and but he had to make his way through a world that he wasn't necessarily that comfortable in, because he was aware of his lack of education and things like that, and so he had to put his trust in somebody, and for a while, his manager did well by him, but later on, Muddy's estate, as well as Willie Dixon's, sued his manager's estate successfully. So my opinion of his manager was not without some foundation.
If I was to ask you what Muddy might have taught you about the blues, would you be able to say what that would be?
I don't know about Muddy so much, but just the blues culture and black life taught me a certain forbearance. I say in the book that the blues is not a music of despair. It's really a music of hope, and with the promise that the sun's going to shine in my back door someday. And they just had this almost spiritual resignation, this just uh, a way of accepting whatever the world threw at them and just kept on pressing on. And it was a real lesson in humility in a way. Uh, the blues people were just the most down to earth, generous, open people that I ever met, that I ever knew. I mean, I've been around a lot of music stars in the rock world, pop, country, western, jazz, all of it. And some of the people were really down to earth and nice and personable, and other people, thought that they. I don't want to say that. Uh,
Yeah, I
other
get it.
people were other people, let's say, were mad with their own perfume, as it were,
Right.
and but all the blues people were just down to earth, because they came up with nothing. They were grateful for whatever they had, and yeah, it was a great life lesson to be around those people.
Racism, which was a big part of that time and when you first started, and I guess in a way it still is, but did you witness any racism? And in some ways, did you face any racism yourself?
Not from black people,
Right.
so you can draw the other conclusion. Yeah, as I say, I was the white boy in the band, But at any rate, no, I never had any trouble from any of the musicians or even in any of the clubs because when you're playing the clubs on the, I was playing black clubs on the south side and west side, but, they had liquor licenses that they had to protect.
Hmm.
So the club owners were not interested in having any trouble in their clubs. You had to be careful on the street getting to the club.
Right.
So, if you were driving down there, you wanted to make sure you parked as close as you could to the club, lock it up, scout the area, and get in and get out because it was being on the street that posed the danger.
While you were with Muddy's band, you had the opportunity to play in the rock world, opening up for various bands, including Eric Clapton, ZZ Top, other musicians. What did that world seem like to you back then?
Well, certainly the difference between touring and traveling in the Muddy Waters band or in the blues world as opposed to traveling in the rock world, which I did with a couple different people, it's just night and day. In the blues world, you're traveling in, broken down vans and you're staying in cheap roadside motels and, you're eating road food and it's a tough life. I mean, I never I loved the life. I was young and it was a great adventure and you know I could take it all. But certainly the circumstances were much more accommodating, luxurious, comfortable in the rock world because there you're traveling in limos and private jets and you're staying in five-star hotels. So, given the choice between the two, I go rock.
Yeah, sorry, but I meant like when Muddy Waters opened up for ZZ Top or Eric Clapton, how was the band received at that point by the rock
Oh, we
audience?
killed. We killed. We killed. As a matter of fact, I think the first time Eric saw us, he came out to watch Muddy's set the first night and never did it again because it was too intimidating to him. But yeah.
It's interesting that so while you're on tour with Eric Clapton, one night he asks you to have dinner with him. This is the tour in the railway car,
Right.
and you have a dinner date with Eric Clapton, just you and him in his dining room car. Was that a foreshadow of what was to come of him asking you to join the band, or did you see it that way?
I I didn't really, not at the time. I mean, I had no thought about joining Eric's band, but after I left Muddy and I had the legendary blues band and I went on with other aspects of my life and career, um, I started hearing rumors about Eric getting, wanting to make his real blues record because people had always, he was always blues based and started with John Mayall and all that. But everybody was waiting for him to make his real blues record, just with classics and all that stuff. And when I saw that, I thought, well, if he hires a harmonica, I figured it's either going to be me or Kim Wilson. And I was just grateful that it was me.
But did you have any inkling before that? When the phone call actually arrived, did you think, "Oh yeah, I this was bound to happen," or were you completely surprised by it?
Oh no, no, I was surprised. It was a great phone call when I mean, I'd been scuffling, playing blues in clubs. It's a constant scuffle. It's hard to get ahead, and so I mean, I was surviving and with my own band playing around the country. Um, but one night the phone rang, and it was Mike Kappas, who was a top agent in the music business, and he told me that Eric Clapton's people were trying to reach me and had some trouble finding me, and they called him to see if he could run me down, and he ran me down, and I couldn't have been happier. I mean, as I say in the book, when I hung up, I jumped. Me and my wife jumped out of bed and started dancing around the house. I mean, it was because that's just it's like you're playing class B baseball in the minor leagues or something, and then all of a sudden you get the call, oh, we want you to play center field for the New York Yankees, can you do it? you know so
But
yeah.
at that point, you weren't like there was no commitment to join the band. It was 6 gigs or something at the Royal Albert Hall.
Right,
So there
right.
was nothing to say it was more than a few weeks rehearsal and then a few gigs.
Right. It was just a one shot appearance at the Royal Albert Hall. It was 1991. It was the year that he did 24 nights, and he made an album called 24
Hmm.
Nights. He did 6 nights with a small rock band, 6 nights with a bigger rock band that had horns, and he did 6 nights with a blues band, an all star blues band that I was part of, and then 6 nights with full orchestra. So I was just contracted for the 6 blues nights. We rehearsed a couple days, and then we did those 6 nights, and then he on the last night when we were back in the dressing room after the show, he pulled me aside and asked me to come back the following year in '92, and I was thrilled to know that I'd be doing it again. But 2 weeks after I arrived back home, the horrible thing happened with his son
Right.
falling out the window, and so his plans changed, and he didn't do blues at the Albert Hall in '92. But then I did get the call to come back for the Albert Hall in '93, and then I stayed in his band. I went to Japan with him and did more European tours and U.S. tours, and I was with him through '96.
So, like, if I Google Eric Clapton's harmonica player, your name comes up. I'm not sure if he's ever played with any other harmonica player for a long term.
I don't think so.
So that says that says a lot. But tell me about that relationship. Tell me about your relationship with Eric, because that's something you don't really go into in the book about maybe the interaction you had with him. I'm just curious. I expect that it's a good relationship, and the fact that he kept calling you back speaks the world. But I just wonder, is it purely a business relationship, or do you get to hang? Do you get to know him as a person? How does that work?
We didn't really hang too much outside of playing. I mean, there were certain social events. There were dinners and things that the band would go to. Uh, you know, we had one after his 100th performance at the Albert Hall, and there were some other events like that. But we didn't really hang out that much. He had joined AA. He had cleaned up his act and stopped doing drugs and drinking. His attitude was good though. He didn't mind if we had some wine or some beer in the dressing room, but he certainly didn't want people to get drunk.
Right.
Of course, that was not really a problem with anybody in the band, but yeah, we didn't really hang outside of the music situation.
When you record, do you talk about the blues, or when you're playing, do you talk about the blues? Like, do you exchange ideas and
Well, he was pretty much. I mean, he and Muddy were both pretty much laissez-faire band leaders. They hired you because they figured you could do the job, and they pretty much let you do it. Now, if there was something egregious that you were playing that he didn't care for, or he had another idea, he might mention something. Oh, can you play this riff or whatever? Uh, but otherwise, he left you to your own devices because he figured you knew what to do. I mean, the stuff he was playing with me, that was right up my wheelhouse. I
right?
mean, that was straight Chicago blues that I'd been playing my whole career. So, I didn't really have any trouble with that. But I played on other tunes too. I played on Tears in Heaven and Layla, and can't remember. I played on I Shot the Sheriff or Cocaine, or I played some of his other songs too when we would do mixed shows. But it was always a thrill. It was always a thrill.
Does your playing, if I was to ask you about how you played the harmonica, and I know it's a different time, but the way you approached playing the harmonica for Marty's band versus for Eric's band, was that different or was it basically the same?
Basically the same. I mean, it was because we were playing the same music. You know, he was playing Chicago blues. That's why he hired me. That's what I do.
Right.
You know.
So what I find interesting is when you're at the county jail and you're not really enjoying your job, you get that phone call. I mean, it almost seemed like you were not really liking your job at that point. There was a certain, it was like a game changer. When Eric's people call you and offer you a job, it seemed like the same type of thing. And in the same way, when you decide to create your masterclass harmonica lessons, that seemed to come at a time when you weren't really happy with what you were doing as well. It's interesting how these things happen in your life and you find a way to do something different and those things turn out to be something really special.
Well, it all comes down to trying to avoid working for a living. So you have to come up with some. You know, I didn't put it at the front of the book. I sometimes I think maybe I should have a little phrase. It's the origin is anonymous. I don't know who first came up with this. It isn't my line, but it's certainly appropriate. And it says, "I was too lazy to work and too nervous to steal, so I had to become a musician."
Well, I think it's done you quite well. When we talk about that masterclass series that you created, were you surprised by the success of that?
No, no, I wasn't. Even though, I mean, I was going kind of against the odds because it was so much more expensive than any other teaching product out there. But I had done a fair amount of private teaching, and I had always asked my students, if you have any teaching materials, bring them along. Let me see what they are. And in reviewing the various instructional methods and tapes, books, whatever that they brought in, I just thought they were sorely lacking in the ability to teach what people really wanted to learn as far as blues harmonica. So after the gig with Eric ended, I was kind of looking for a direction because I didn't really want to go back on the road with another band and in the blues world and just keep on scuffling. So I thought, well, maybe I could put together an instructional method that would really blow everything else out of the water. And I just did it. Um, I thought I almost had an advantage in teaching because I was so musically ignorant that I thought the I had the ability to convey the information to people equally ignorant. And as I said in the book, the greatest players in history couldn't even read English, much less music. So I thought most of the other things had too much either musical notation or tablature or things to look at. And I think that actually is harmful to learning music. The most important thing in learning music is your ear. Now, especially in a music like blues, uh, which doesn't really lend itself to notation. If you're playing classical, yes, you have to learn how to read, but you should still learn how to hear before you learn how to read. And so I I made an audio method. I had 3 CDs on it, and I had it packaged in this beautiful boxed set Uh, I basically spared no expense, and it was a $60 item, which was considerably more than any other thing out there. But it sold very, very well, and actually kept me going for a number of years until there's so many free lessons and some good ones too on the internet on YouTube. So that kind of slowed things down.
And then I presume at some point you decided to pursue this book seriously and sit down to write. How long did it actually take you to write this book once your friend said, this is good stuff, you really need to pursue it?
Well, I'll tell you, I was just I still have his note in my phone, his little email to me, where he said, "This book is so He said, "This writing is so effing great that you have to get it published." He said, "There isn't a ghostwriter alive that can write this well." So anyway, I happen to remember that was September of 2021. And then I had the book finished, I think, 2 years later. And then, of course, the process of selling it that's a whole other mountain to climb.
Right.
But I finally did that and got a good publisher. And they did a great job. I'm very happy with the way the book came out and looks. And like I said, they hardly touched it editorially. It's pretty much as I wrote it. And
Would you say the
so I'm very proud
process
of it.
was easy or enjoyable? Would you say that the process was enjoyable?
I Yes, it's a very different creative process, certainly, than playing music. I mean, in music, the best things I ever played will never be heard again. They're not on record. They're evanescent. They just float off into the ether. But when you write a song or you write a book or you have something in a permanent form that you can keep adjusting. So when I would write something, I tend to edit as I go. I mean, a lot of people that talk about writing say, well, just spill it out on the page. Just don't worry about just get the information out there and then go back and clean it up and polish it and all that. I can't do that. I'm not a fast writer because whatever I write, then I go back and I say it in my head to get the rhythm of it. And so I'm constantly polishing as I go. And then after it's done, then you can go back again and polish it further, until you and the copy editor, everybody's satisfied or whatever. But it's more satisfying in a way because I'm very proud of the book. I mean, there are things I've recorded, that are hard for me to listen to. I wince and I say, "Oh, why did I zig when I should have zagged?" You know.
Right.
But the book, I'm proud. That's the way I wrote it. You know, even after it's published, I can read a passage and say, "Oh, I could have changed that word." But no, I'm very pleased with it, and the process. Uh, the process was satisfying when I got something down that I was pleased with. It was a satisfying process. I didn't labor too much over it. I mean, there were some days where it was a little slower going than others. I'm not a fast writer uh, because, like, I squeeze every word out.
I wonder, because, I mean, I really enjoyed your writing. Other people obviously have. Have you considered the possibility of writing something different? Maybe a fiction?
No, nah, this is it. It's one and done. I mean, my buddy Bob Sabag, who kind of lit the fire under me to write this book, he told me, you're really a good writer. You could do this. You could ghostwrite for other people. You could, but I have no desire to do that. I had one great story to tell. I told it, and I'm done.
Was there other things that you had to leave out, or you decided to leave out that you thought twice about?
Well, so many rock and roll biographies are just, they're all hinged on the salacious bits, the
Right.
sexual ex, escapades and getting drunk and trashing hotel rooms or whatever. Anyway, I wasn't a choir boy, but I didn't feel it necessary to go into all the gory details. So I gave it some acknowledgement, but I didn't put in. I mean, there were a few stories I think I could have made very entertaining, but I decided not to.
What did you learn about yourself during this process?
Well, I'll tell you, the process of writing your own life story reveals certain patterns that you may not have been aware of until you go back and see. And one of the things that I noticed, and it's all about writing, is that I think there were at least 4 or 5 incidents when I sat down and put pen to paper that had a real impact. I mean, in the book, I know. Well, first when I wrote the contest to be Bat Boy for the City Series between the White Sox and the Cubs, that and won the prize and all that. That was one. I wrote a letter to my father that he carried with him to the day he died that had a lot of impact on him. I wrote to Sonny Terry when he was dying in the hospital, and his wife you know, just appreciated it so much because she said it meant so much to Sonny. Uh, I wrote a thing, when I was in the Army, I was a paratrooper in the 101st Airborne Division, as you know from reading the book,
Hmm.
and I applied for discharge as a conscientious objector in order to throw some sand into the gears of the U.S. Army in order to protect me from going to Vietnam. And it was a successful ploy, but that 4-page statement basically saved my life. And so I realized that I have some impact when I write, and I really didn't notice that pattern until I wrote the book, and I saw all these times when I had done that,
And then you wrote the book. Like it's,
and then I wrote the book.
which is pretty impressive. So the title "Dancing with Muddy" was that. How does one come up with a title? Is that something that you do, or is that something that the publisher recommends, or how did that title come about?
No, I came up with the title and the subtitle. I didn't really have a title for a while, and then yeah, it popped into my head when I guess I can't remember the exact point whether I was describing the first time I danced with Muddy and Mojo, but no, that was my idea. Some people told me the publisher would have other ideas, but they didn't mess with this book.
Well, I think it speaks to how well it's written and how you handled everything. I mean, even the picture, like the front cover, which is a great cover for the
Yeah, that's
title.
a great one. I'm glad they got that. That was from a concert we did in Germany in in the 70s. Yeah, that's a great one.
I'm curious. You mentioned that most of your great playing has gone into the ether, but is there a recording that you're most proud of?
Well, Eric's album From the Cradle. I'm very proud of the work I did on that. Um, you know, a couple of my instrumentals, Blues in a Dream and Blues for Big Nate. The slow blues is what I always loved, and that was really one of my strengths. Um, yeah, my last record, Down in the Mood Room. Yeah, the opening track is a Horace Silver tune called "Doodlin'," an old jazz tune. Well, it's from the '50s, and I'm very proud of that one. It's a good piece of music. But yeah, I generally, in the words of a former agent of mine, I'd rather run a cheese grater up and down my arm as listen to myself play. It's just I'm too much of a perfectionist, you know.
Can you, my final question to you, and I don't know if you can answer this, but you have been gifted with the chance to play with two of the greatest blues musicians, Muddy Waters and Eric Clapton. And I think it speaks the world of you that you were the harmonica player in both of those bands. What is it about you think that put you in that position? What is it that Eric and Muddy Waters both saw in you and in your playing that allowed you that opportunity?
Well, you know, somebody wants to find luck as preparation plus opportunity. When the door opens, you have to be ready to go through it. And I had the I had the chops at the time that Muddy hired me, and of course, by the time Eric hired me, I was fully qualified for the gig. Um, and you can't beat timing in this life. And I mean, the best bumper sticker I ever saw said, "Life is what happens while you're making other plans."
Right.
And you never know. I mean, going down one street instead of going to the same place, turning down the other street can change your life.
Mm-hmm.
So you never know. But I was in the right place at the right time. First of all, I was born in the right place. I was born in Chicago in the Maxwell Street area, which was like I say, the crucible of Chicago blues. That's where it was born, and I was there at the birth.
Right.
So the sounds were implanted in my head. And then later when they were triggered, I learned my craft, and then when the opportunity arose with Muddy, I was ready. So you can't beat luck. I mean, I believe that with enough focus and determination, you can bend reality to your will up to 50%. The other 50% is just blind luck, an indifferent universe. So you can't count on that aspect. But to the extent that you can control things with your own focus and determination, you can bend reality. And somehow it just worked out. Because, I mean, having the fantasy of playing harmonica in the Muddy Waters Blues Band, that's strictly a one off.
Right.
You know, the stars have to align for something like that. I mean, if you want to be a brain surgeon, there's a path you can follow, and you can be a brain surgeon. If you're smart enough and dedicated enough and a good enough student, and you focus and you take the right courses and you study and you do your homework, and then you do your internship and your residency, and boom, you're a brain surgeon. It's a long path, but there's a way to do it. But if you want to play blues harmonica in the Muddy Waters Blues Band, the stars have to align. So believe me, I am grateful every day for my good fortune in this life.
Do you think if your friend didn't say you take that harmonica with you on your trip to Europe?
Exactly. It never would have happened. Who knows what I'd be a bum laying in the gutter, or I could be a president of Harvard. I have no idea what would have happened,
Right.
but this is what happened, and I'm very grateful for it. I had a blessed life. I mean, because some of us are not cut out really to work for other people or work in structured environments. And being a musician and being a traveling musician it suited me. Every day was different. Every place was different. You met new people every night. Every gig was different. I got to I've been to all 50 states. I've been to something over 30 countries on every continent except Antarctica. So if you can find me a gig on Antarctica, that's on my bucket list. But I've been I've been blessed.
And the fact that you've played the Royal Albert Hall more than any other place.
I played there 55 times.
That's crazy.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
Jerry, thank you so much for doing this. It's a real honor to be able to speak to you. I loved your book. The book is called Dancing with Muddy, and thank you so much for sharing your life with us.
Well, thank you. It was great fun to talk to you. And I hope the people will pick up on the book. It's a great read.
And they can do that, obviously, from major retailers, your website.
Well, I don't sell them on my website. My website's directed to online retailers. You can get it at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Books A Million, all kinds of places online. And, of course, at your local bookstore. And if they don't have it in stock, they can order it, and they'll have it in a couple of days.
Great. Thank you, Jerry.
All right. Thank you, Michael.